I had a request to do a Naboo space cruiser from someone on one of the Facebook groups, and I thought I'd take the opportunity to turn it into a tutorial on how I find STL models online and turn them into space engineer ships. I just kind of do this for fun, and I think that other people's abilities to make 3D images and shapes is much better than mine. So uh, without any further ado, we're going to get started. I'll talk about the tools that I use as we go through them one at a time, but just really quick, this is kind of the process. So we start with the actual model. My search here was just for Naboo on MakerBot Thingiverse or thingiverse.com. And you can see we got down here about the first page results. Click into here. Here we have the ability to give the author the credit that is due. You can tip the designer and so forth, but you can also download the files, and those will come in as a lovely set of files inside a zip. What we were really after here is the STL. This format is kind of the Rosetta Stone of model formats. All of the different programs speak this language. And the first edit we're going to do to the model is in the Windows 10 free Windows Store app called 3D Builder. All right, so we've got the model. It wants to import it. It's going to bring it into its format. We're going to let that happen. The first stop here is 3D Builder because of its repair tool. It's really very, very good and very easy. We're going to go into Mesh Mixer in a minute. It also has a repair tool, but it's nowhere near as good at fixing this particular type of problem. So now we've got a file that Windows should be reasonably happy with. The very first thing we want to do is save it, because if it won't let us save it, then we're sunk. And this particular file has a little bit of issue with letting us do that. So we're going to actually save it into an STL. And we're just going to do like _L because this is the large version. Right, so it did successfully write out an STL. Fine. We can even bring that in, not with the open function, sorry about that, but we can just go into the folder and just bring that guy in. All right, so this is the one that we just exported. Now in here with the object selected, you can scale it, which we're going to want to do because we want to hollow this out a little bit more. We want to make the shell as thin as possible. It can also be important if you're dealing with a 3D model that was never intended to be made into a space engineer ship, which is frankly almost all of them. They may have things on the inside of the model that you don't want, support structures, leftover parts of a tube or something that was used to draw the shape, and all kinds of little things can be inside here. We want all of that gone as much as possible because it's just blocks we're going to have to delete later. And again, these ships are going to be pretty heavy. This particular method of coming up with a ship makes something that's artistically pleasing and not necessarily all that lightweight. So we're going to have to deal with weight, or else just add even more gyros. Gyros are, I think, the weakest link, but thrust as well. So we scaled it up from 20 to 100. We're going to save that. All right, it's letting us save. Good news. We might even try and scale it up a little bit more just to get that thinning really right on point. Let's go for 200. Yep, not mad at us. Awesome. All right, the object is still selected, so I'm going to go to Edit. We're going to hollow. We're going to say our minimum thickness, just take that all the way to the bottom. And see, it has to think about it for a minute, but it's like, oh, okay, I can make you just a shell of a ship, and boom, there it did. So it now has just the external frame of this lovely thing, and we're going to look and verify that here in just a minute in our Mesh Mixer, which is, I think, my favorite file editor for actually getting into the faces themselves and making changes. So now we have just a thin external thing. If we have a model that's just ridiculous in the number of its polygon count, or it's just making space engineers have a really bad day, then we could simplify with the simplify tool, or we could smooth. These will both take away the number of polygons in the shape and kind of squish it down some. This can help, this can hurt. It totally depends on what the model has. If you're talking about something maybe a little more organic looking with a lot of bumps and stuff, Space Engineers is going to mangle that to death. This one's very smooth. So we're going to leave it as is, but you can play with these as needed. You're going to see a split tool here, and I'm going to show you a split in Mesh Mixer in a minute, but do not use this split tool because it will fill in It will not ask you, but it will fill in a wall where it splits because a proper 3D object is solid all the way around the outside. Well, this is not a proper 3D object. We're making a space engineer ship. So, with all that said, we've got it scaled, we've got it hollowed. We're going to export it. And in this particular case, I'm just going to overwrite the file that I just made because I don't need to keep an extra copy of it. So there we go. And we're pretty well done with 3D Builder. If the project has you editing faces and making changes to these files, you may wind up going back and forth because, again, the repair in 3D Builder is super solid. Also, Simplify and Smooth work really, really, really well in this tool. It's just that it doesn't give me any way that I'm aware of to actually edit the individual faces. So that means we're done with 3D Builder for now. Both copies of it. And we're going to open this with Mesh Mixer. I'm just going to do a right click open with because I have the application installed. You can download this for free from Autodesk. Really, really super cool tool. Has far more than I know how to do with it. But we need to check the inside of this model because, as I mentioned, it's not intended for space engineers, it's intended for 3D printing. So first things first, we go to Edit and Align. It's going to put the model 000 where it thinks it should be. That's totally fine because we want Mesh Mixer to make changes to it. So boom, sideways, fantastic. Very next thing we want to do is a plane cut. And since we centered it a minute ago, it's cutting it right down the center plane. This is perfect. We're going to only import half of the ship. And we're going to do this because, one, it makes it far, far easier to make a symmetrical ship design because Space Engineer's Toolbox, SE Toolbox, has a mirror feature in it, which is just wonderful and lovely. And it cuts our work in half, right? So we're making half a ship, or we're at least making half of a skin of a ship. We may wind up turning on mirror mode in creative mode and building it all the way out. But if you've ever used mirror in creative mode on a large project, you can only see what you're working on. And if something went wrong because it was just slightly different on the other side, it will ignore your changes and you'll go over there and find out, well, it's not symmetrical after all because of problems, right? This eliminates all of that. You're just going to work on half of it. You're going to use the toolbox to mirror it. Now, the thing that it does that the other tool does not is this lovely no fill. So we want to change our fill type on plane cut to no fill. Then we can see, wow, we got a hollow ship. It does have errors in the model. You can see this sort of pinkish color. We're not supposed to be able to see that. That should be a solid face. It's possible to fix it. Frankly, in this ship, I'm testing it before the demo, you don't need to. You might need to. If you need to do some repairs, you can go Analysis, Inspector. Inspector will find problems for you, offer you solutions. In this particular case, I've already tried this. Don't do it. It's just going to mess it up. All right, but see, we've got a hollow ship. And like I said, in other designs, you might find a shelf under this canopy, or you might find additional structures inside these wings. This looks really good, really hollow. We're going to roll with this. Okay, so we've got our half. So we're going to do the same thing, except in this case, it's an export. And we're just going to call this half. Again, half a ship at a time. We duplicate it after. So, boom. Okay, done with Mesh Mixer because, again, there were no faces to delete. If there were, I could use this tool. I could select the individual faces, delete, clean up, inspector, clean up, delete, clean up, etc. Don't have to. Beautiful on the inside. Thank you, model author. You've done me a favor. Again, not a typical one, but this ship is by request. So, done with Mesh Mixer. I don't need to save the .mix version of this file because I'm working on the STLs. So that's done. I have half a ship. Now, I'm going to import it using SE Toolbox. I've got my Creative World loaded here. If you haven't used this tool before, it's pretty straightforward. I recommend you familiarize yourself with it. I'm not going to get into a ton of depth here. I'm just going to show you the import 3D model. Okay, it's going to import relative to your character, and it's going to ask you some questions. First, are we bringing in a small ship or a large ship? What size is this thing that we're bringing in? And do you want to do light or heavy armor? You could put in the entire ship as heavy armor if you wanted to, but I don't do that personally because I think heavy armor is more strategically placed, better strategically placed than the entire ship. It just makes it far, far, far too heavy. And again, these models are heavy to begin with because they're not utilitarian, they're fancy. So to import it, though, I need to know how big the thing is originally. And this is a step that I often forget and then have to go and hunt. I've got it pulled up here from Wikipedia, right? It's a Star Wars ship. So this is the J-type diplomatic barge. We can see we've got 3 measurements here, but we really are going to care about the long pole in the tent. And the model importer doesn't necessarily know front, back, or otherwise yet. Uh, it's just going to know the longest face. So it's 91 meters. But we also did this in half. So 91 meters, is this a large block or a small block? I'll tell you, spoiler alert, it's a small block. Um, I'll show you what the large block looks like as well. But I just have a little block counter spreadsheet up here. It's stupid simple. Small blocks are half of a meter. Okay. Large blocks are 2.5 meters. Fine. The full ship is 91. So half the ship would be 45. So this would mean 18 large blocks or 91. Isn't that convenient? Smalls. So we'll do both of the imports so you can see what that's going to look like in the game. We want to get our half model. You could import the others, but again, reasons not to. We're going to start with the large ship. You could do a station if you don't want it to float around. Doesn't matter. But we're going to say max length here is 18. And see, it's saying height. Well, is that going to make sense? Yeah, it's going to make sense. It's the longest pole in the tent. And again, that's going to come down to 45 meters. It's going to import it relative to you with the distance here. So 10, it's right in front of where I last logged off on the save. Fantastic. Create. And boom, that's all it takes. I'm going to call this large half. Okay. Now, as promised, we're going to bring this in as a small ship as well. Same process. We grab the half, we leave it small. These are some options here. Thin, thick, with smoothing. I like thin with smoothing. Again, I'm trying to keep my weight down. And we're going to set max length to 91, which you'll see is the same 45 meters. We don't want to import it at the same distance because otherwise it'll merge the 2 blocks together and Clang will get mad. So we'll just add a 0 here. We'll put that one 100 meters out instead. Okay, all right, create that one. And this one will be called small half. And don't worry, I do this kind of thing all the time. Bring it in large, bring it in small. Look at it. Like what makes more sense? Large has numerous advantages. There are no significantly sized gyros yet for small. So you're going to wind up having to do 30 or 40 of the things on a ship this size. Hopefully, maybe in a future update, we'll get something. We didn't used to have doors in small. We do now, thankfully. Right? So, small versus large, it's an interesting decision. Oops, not join. Load. Creative. Watch our lovely loading screen. Hopefully I saved it. Demos. But we're going to log into a ship directly in front of us, which makes things easy. You don't have to try and find it. There's not exactly an antenna on the thing yet. It's just a frame. All right, there's our large. And you see, it brought in a ship. Well, at this scale, it's 1 block thick on the wings, which is not a terrible idea, right? But that means you're going to have trouble plumbing them. You'd have to, say, pipe through the center of the wing or something. You could very easily put some ion engines in the different directions here, so that could work. But there's no space inside the thing at all. Maybe that's good. Maybe that's bad. This would wind up making a pretty interesting large-scale fighter. If you were into that kind of thing, I haven't tried it yet. But here's our small. And you see the small, okay, much more true to form in the same size. The wings wound up being 2 blocks thick, which that's probably fine. Um, we got our 2 engine pods, we got our cockpit here, and you see there is some extra stuff on the inside, but not a whole lot. These faces are probably not necessary, and they're going to make it a little tight. You see here, this is 2 blocks wide. Can I fit through? Yeah, I technically can. It's not very comfortable. Um, but there you go. I've got a shell in the game. So what you would do, go and make all your changes. I'm not going to do that, save you that now, but like this very sharp point, maybe this needs to be smoothed. We could do edges instead. We want to open up these holes, maybe put some hatches in here so we can get to these engine pods. You could start building up the engines and pieces, but I want to show you another really cool trick first before we get to actually fleshing up the ship. So hold that thought. We'll be back to it. Before we do this, though, I need to finish the plot here with SE Toolbox. So I'm going to save this world in Space Engineers, go back to the toolbox, open it again. All I'm doing this for is to update my character's position, or if I had made changes to the model as I advised you to do. So on this small ship, I'm going to come in here to mirror. All right, I'm going to sort by distance from my player. And the small half that I made, I'm going to go to mirror, and it's going to say, okay, you want to use the symmetry planes that you've predefined. You want to find the largest surface. Odd, like this one is the one that usually works. It's going to take the largest surface. I don't remember actually on this wider. I think this one works better on ships that are longer than they are wide. I'm going to try this one. Find largest surface, even left, right. There's certainly a rhyme or reason to it, but I'm going to mirror this. Let's see what that does. It's having to think about it. All right, so we've got it's 182 blocks, 91 meters wide. That's perfect. As long as it did the right plane on the mirror, we're done. Now you can also do this manually with merge blocks and such, but this is of course much faster and easier, and you don't need tiny ships in space to do it. So, continuing the game. We could have probably duplicated this first. Yeah, look at that. Our perfectly symmetrical ship. One other little tip about SE Toolbox, this is also the only way to get an odd number blocked ship. This one actually happened to come in as even, but it will always import them as even, which is a problem for blocks that are 3 wide. Like, where do I put the cockpit? Do I do off center left, off center right? You can put a block in here before you mirror, and it will come in as odd. So anyway, that's how you do it. It would save you from only making half the change. Again, if you didn't split the model in half, you'd have this right now. You'd have to cut inside and start making changes, which you could do. You could turn on mirror mode and do that whole thing. Could work. But let's get this guy out of here. I want to show you one more sort of interesting trick. We're going to get him out of here as well and save the game. Now we're going off into black magic here for just a moment. But as you saw, it was really hard for me to get inside that model and make changes because I just barely fit. Well, there is a solution to that. So I'm loading the creative world without the ships in it just so that there's no confusion. And I'm going to redo the import for that small ship. So 3D model, half. I could potentially do this without the smoothing. Just make it a little more blocky if I wanted to go through and smooth it myself. There was a lot of smoothing on the inside. So in this case, I think I will, just again to keep that weight down. So we're doing small ship, light armor. Again, we're bringing in the half, so 91 blocks. Okay? Then we can do it right in front of me. Boom. Save that file. Back into Space Engineers and load the game. I should have done continue game. Would have been faster. Sorry, guys. And we're going to be back to our one little ship. Now, I'm going to show you something about blueprint files that you may not have realized before. They are simply XML files. If you've dealt with XML before, it's a fiddly little format. And as long as everything's structured correctly and makes sense, it works. You just have to kind of speak that language and get into that mode. So here's our half of a ship. And you'll see, like again, I can't really get in here to make changes. And when you're thinning, especially, there are a lot of blocks that can go. Like if I switch on this block here, that block wasn't needed, right? There's nothing behind it. That block was. Okay. Let me fix it. Put that back. So you can kind of come through and cut out a ton of weight. And that's going to save you big time in terms of, again, thrust and gyros, because this thing was made to look pretty. But I can't get inside it. Well, how do I solve this problem? Well, best thing I can do is make a blueprint. And we cut this dude out. And we save it. Actually, I should exit. Let that run. All right, then I go to my blueprints directory. Blueprints local. Okay, this was small half, I think I called it. Yeah, there he is. So we've got a BPSBC and a SBCB5. This is a compressed version of the file that can go if we're going to make manual edits. That's the first thing that can go. So we're going to just open this up with Notepad++. Let's go think about it for a minute and look. It's an STL file. Or it's an XML file. And see, we're going to change this from small to large. Super, super weird, right? Easy enough to do. I learned this by looking at the blueprint files for other large ships, and I had it open earlier, so spoiler alert there. But if we look at this Sith Fury thing, what is the difference? Well, you could compare through a lot of things, but for only armor blocks, and I have to stress this because it's only armor blocks that this makes sense. Other blocks like conveyors and things do not follow the same naming conventions, and you're going to wind up breaking your blueprint. You may break it to the point where Space Engineers just doesn't load certain blocks, which is probably fine, or you may break it to the point where the blueprint is not working at all, and obviously that's not as desirable, right? So, but in this case, we look at grid size enum, large, subtype name, large block, armor block. When we go over here, grid size synonym small, small block, armor block. So what we can do, and I have successfully done this in the past, is just find and replace. Everything that's close, small, we swap with close large. This means that any word, any XML word that begins with small is now going to begin with large throughout this blueprint. Okay? We save that. We go back into our Space Engineers game. I'm in creative mode, so I can just paste blueprints in. So we go F10, I called it small half. Looks very similar from a distance, but as you get close, you see we are now in a large black ship. So I can get all the way in here inside this wing and delete these blocks out, which again saves me weight. And that's exactly what I want. I could lay in a trench for eventual application of conveyors if I was going to put guns in the wing or something. You just kind of want to get in here and take these out. All right, one more trick as far as making it easy to tell which blocks matter and which don't. So this ship is not smoothed. So that won't work with this particular ship. I'm going to go ahead and delete this guy. But what you can do when you do an import is go back and edit the colors based on block shape. So we're going to demo that real quick, and that's going to be the last trick for today. So I've got an edited world. I'm opening it up again. Import 3D model. Again, working with my half. I'm going to leave it with the smoothing. I'm going to go max length again here for 91 to keep it in scale. And there's nothing in front of me, so I can bring it right in where I am. Now, SE Toolbox will show you the cubes that the ship is made up of, and you can sort by any of these categories. So here we've got all the light armor blocks are here. Fantastic. Well, as we scroll down, it's got the corners and everything else separately. Well, we know that corners and angles and other things are not are going to be essential. They're not going to be structural in nature, most likely, on the inside, but never on the outside. The game only put them in there to create the shape. So we don't want to delete these because that then messes with our shape and we're going to wind up putting them back. Well, what we can do is very, very quickly and easily make these some obnoxious color like bright white. Okay. And then save it. Then as we go into our Space Engineers world and we look at the model, all the corner pieces and angle pieces and non-block pieces are bright white. This tells us that I can very easily, safely delete a piece that's not white and replace it with a block if I happen to see space on the other side. So as you see, those are all white. These are not. Why does this matter? Well, when you're inside the ship, okay, that's gray, that's white. See, I deleted that gray block. It's hard to see because I'm small. All of these blocks were extra. These white blocks are not. These definitely need to stay. These could potentially go or not. You can delete it. Oh, I see space. Okay, put it back, right? But all of these blocks in here, that's just extra weight. That can all go. And I know this visually, easily, other than experimentation, because I painted them as white. Now, I've got the smoothing on the inside, which complicates matters with this particular model. But you get the point. Paint them by shape, and then you can very quickly and easily see, well, these can go. And helps you lighten the load. And again, with this trick where you're doing half, you're only cutting half of it at a time. So makes it easy. And since we can see that we are pretty safe to delete some of these blocks, maybe we can actually edit this model in this shape. Oh, got daylight there, so we'll fill that one back in. But that's it. That's how we do STL models. The rest of it is time, patience, and a little bit of artisticness. But you get this half the way you want. If necessary, you can throw a block in here to widen it a little. Then you duplicate it, and you'll wind up with an odd blocked ship that has your changes on both sides. I'm going to post this in a couple of places. Feel free to ask me questions in the arguments section there. And if I got anything wrong, just comment to educate others. But this is how we do it. And have a great day, everybody.